everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Amy Huang, and I'm GFI's Associate Director of Scientific Ecosystems.
And my name is Nathan Ahlgrim. I am GFI's Academic Community Manager, and the two of us are incredibly excited to be facilitating this session in which we will be spotlighting 6 different powerful academic leaders and their experiences building education and research programs in their universities.
As we dive into this session today, one of the main threads of this conference I hope you'll bear in mind is the really essential idea that all of you, and all of us really, are alternative protein champions. Today we will hear from 6 speakers from 6 different institutions around the globe. You'll notice that our speakers represent a variety of career stages, from undergraduate students to tenured faculty. What all of these individuals have in common is that they've each chosen to leverage their unique positions of influence within their academic ecosystems to address the critical need for more institutional resources and support for alternative proteins. So regardless of who you are, what type of institution you belong to, what corner of the globe you're hailing from today, what career stage you're in, our hope is that you can leave our session today feeling inspired to use their projects as models from which to base your own ecosystem building efforts.
After the presentations, we will be bringing all of our speakers back onto the stage for a Q&A session. As our speakers are presenting, you're welcome to either add your questions to this session's swap card queue, or you can also wait and we will be including a live Q&A as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nathan. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our first speaker to the stage, Professor Wei Biao Zhou from the National University of Singapore. Wei Biao is a professor Wei Biao is a professor and head of the Department of Food Science and Technology at the National University of Singapore. He will be sharing lessons learned from his efforts to weave alternative protein curricula into food science education at the university. Wei Biao, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Amy. I thought I'm the last one. According to the order of the photo, I mentally prepared to be the last speaker. Thank you very much. Firstly, please allow me to thank GFI for the kind invitation and give me the opportunity to share some of the development back into my university. And I guess I don't need to explain too much on the topic. Just share at the National University of Singapore what we have been doing and also what is our future plan in terms of the alternative protein research and education. And I hope I operate this correctly. Yeah, okay. Now, I'm not sure how many of you really know where Singapore is. And this is the map. We often call Singapore a little red dot because it's so small, it doesn't occupy a sizable space in a map. And that little dot right in the, I think I have a, oh, okay, forget it. It's where Singapore is, but just for fun, just to let you know, this is the map we used in Singapore. So we are right in the middle of the world, all right? But anyway, I think some of you may know the story already. What driving Singapore is quite unique from other countries. That's why I said a global issue versus a local issue has to be taken care of when you develop a research and education. For Singapore, I think security is probably coming first compared to sustainability, but we care about both, of course. The reason is Singapore is a little island country, so small, and the land, the area dedicated to agriculture production is less than 1%, which is somewhere around 7 square kilometers. 7, single digits. There's really nothing, okay? For Singapore, over the years, we have been imported more than 90%. Even today, it's still more than 90%. So therefore, just before COVID, the country launched a national plan, which is called 30 by 30. So by 2030, we aim to produce 30% of the nutritional need within the country. And COVID didn't help. Okay, so far, a few years after, we're still less than 10% produced locally. So it's a huge challenge for us. Of course, the government have a different strategies, which I wouldn't elaborate over here. If there are any of you interested, I'll be happy to explain further. There are multiple strategies on how to improve the sustainability. But nevertheless, just before COVID in 2019, the government launched a very big ambition in terms of a heavy investment in the R&D of food. Not necessarily alternative protein, but alternative protein is one of the major areas. It's area number 2. And among the 3 different areas, and the amount of investment in terms of dollar value is probably the largest, for very good reason. Again, as I said, we don't produce much, and alternative protein obviously is a very feasible way for the country to produce locally compared to the traditional agriculture activity. But this year, the government announced the R&D, SFS R&D program 2.0. SFS is nice, it's symmetric. As you can see, it stands for Singapore Food Story. So 2.0, again, emphasizing on the food security challenges, and particularly on sustainability and circularity. All right? Food safety, of course, across all the sections, regardless of where we're talking about. Now, I guess I don't really need to talk about this at this conference. Singapore still remains to be the only country where you can legally buy cultured meat products in the market, which is done by American company. Okay? So if you happen to visit Singapore, please make sure you try out this particular product. When we approved the sale, the regulatory approval back in December 2020 has really made a headline news around the world. And this year is 2023, isn't it? So 3 years later, it still remains the only market you can buy this. Hopefully, the US will be very quickly by FDA and USDA approval of the 2 companies over here. Now, my university happened to be the oldest and the largest in the country. I am not very sure why that number disappeared on the slides. We were established back in 1905. So very soon we are celebrating, almost 20 years ago, we celebrated 100th anniversary. If you believe the university ranking, we ranked very well, and by THE, the Times Higher Education ranking, as number 19 in the world. And just short, I think last month or 2 months ago, the QS ranking just released this year's results, and we become number 8 in the world. But the university is very conscious of what kind of graduates we produce, right? And particularly undergraduates, if you talk about, nowadays the undergraduates do not stay in the same job after graduation, they often change. So we give them a very wide a range of education. For example, they need to be digitally be aware, programmable ready. Okay, I just give you a few attributes. So your university gives them the flexibility to be specialized or become very versatile. For example, they can do 1 major, 2 minor in their 4 years education at my university. Now, environmentally consciousness or environmentally aware is actually among the common agenda, regardless of what their major is. So for my department, which is specifically on food science and technology, we started in 1999. So next year, we are celebrating 25th anniversary. Now, the way we connect with the industry, obviously, we need to be the connection, because without food industry, the major doesn't need to exist, right? So we have been always engaged our colleagues from the industry. For example, we do have an industrial academic advisory board where you can easily find our major government regulatory body. And Singapore is much simpler than the US. In terms of food regulation, there is a single agency to deal with that, okay, which is a Singapore Food Agency. And then we have an international famous company, including Juvedan, which is a sponsor of this conference, but also other flavor company like Firmenich, and other ingredients company also from the US, originally National Starch, and nowadays you all know it is known as Ingredient, and as well as a local company, FNN. Now, I'm not sure how many of you is aware of Tindo, which is alternative protein, plant-based food company, Wilma, and is also one of the top 500 company. And we do have adjunct and part-time academic staff coming from the industry, including GFI. So thank you very much. All right. So the department produced about 1,000 alumni over the years. And just quickly to show you, we have a range of courses at the university from undergraduates to postgraduates to adult learning to fulfill the mission of the university as well as the demand from my government. I'm finishing. All right. Now, we also have a concerted effort at the university. For example, we have a minor in environmental sustainability, and the food science and technology is a part of the story, clearly, right, as an environmental concern. Now, the department conducting a lot of research in this space, including cultured meat and plant-based or vertical farming, all right, and which is important for Singapore, as well as international collaboration with ETH. So because of time, I probably wouldn't elaborate on what exactly the research we are conducting. We do have a Q&A session. And just give you some beautiful picture to hopefully you are going to visit Singapore. You're welcome to visit not only Singapore, but also my university, my department. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that development of your ecosystem. That is exactly the kind of thing that we really do hold so dearly here in this ecosystem and at GFI especially. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Adrian recently earned his Master's of Food Systems, during which he co-founded the Alt Protein Project in the very unique ecosystem of EIT food, which he will be sharing more about shortly. And he'll be sharing about how he primed his institution's administration to embrace the idea of and then enact the world's first master's track in protein diversification. Please join me in welcoming Adrian. Gotcha.
Hello. Hello. Thank you, Nathan, for that introduction. The sessions we have had the privilege of attending over the past 2 days have again made clear to me that the success of alternative proteins depends on full systemic change of our food system. From this, we can derive that the key leaders driving this change will need to understand a variety of scientific, entrepreneurial, social, and regulatory aspects in order to maximize their impact. To date, traditional tertiary education still focuses on developing subject specialists, and hence new approaches are needed for the alternative protein education of tomorrow. Last year in April, I realized that the master's program I was studying presented a unique opportunity to pioneer such an approach. The Master of Food System, short MFS, is a pan-European postgraduate program organized by the European Institute for Innovation and Technology, EIT Food. Students spend each semester in a different European country studying at one of the 7 partner universities. There are 2 key characteristics which make the MFS so unique. These are focus areas and modularity. A focus area can be understood as a specialization within the masters. A focus area differs based on the order and selection of universities a student attends. By providing their strong subjects in a condensed 1-semester package, all of these universities contribute their strongest point. In 2022, 7 focus areas were offered, ranging from circular food systems to innovative food processing. Outlining my own path in the focus area of food safety, transparency, and traceability as an example, I began in Turin with a semester focused on food safety and toxicology, followed by a semester in Warsaw focused on management and entrepreneurship, before I headed to Madrid studying omics technologies, precision nutrition, and functional food ingredients, and concluding in a 6-month thesis and internship project. Regardless of whichever focus area a student chooses, all MFS students and the focus area determining the content at the individual universities, all MFS students participate in overarching modules as a cohort online. These modules focus on systems thinking and entrepreneurship, which really ties the whole program together. It was these 2 characteristics, focus area and modularity, that led to the realization that the wheel wouldn't need to be reinvented in order to create a focus area focused on alternative proteins in the MFS program. However, after an initial call with the program's coordinators, it became clear that not everyone is yet convinced by the idea of alternative proteins, and much more work was needed to turn the stream into a degree. Cold messaging Paul Steinhardt on LinkedIn proved to be a winning move for this, as he was immediately on board. For those of you that speak German, I've attached the screenshot to prove it. Besides being a wonderful human being, Paul not only turned out to be endlessly motivated and a reliable team player, but he also brought the additional benefit of representing the student body on the program steering committee. Together, we outlined our idea more clearly and pitched to said steering committee. Despite initially exhibiting moderate levels of enthusiasm, the steering committee agreed to cooperate in order to evaluate the feasibility of our proposal. From here, Paul and I had two major tasks. First, map the ecosystem of the MFS partner universities, and secondly, generate and show student interest in order to convince reluctant admin. To map the ecosystem, we created a simple one-pager with the help of GFI, which outlined relevant topics for alternative proteins. At this point, we were incredibly lucky to have already gained the support of EIT Food, as we were able to convince them to task their coordinators at the universities with the mapping effort. However, the results from this were not exhaustive, and we later decided to repeat it, which to date, 1 year later, is still an ongoing effort, given that we're mapping 7 universities. In order to generate student interest, Paul and I applied to the second batch of the old protein project and co-founded the first multinational chapter within the APP. After 3 months of work behind the scenes, Paul and I pitched to the rest of our cohort at the in-person summer school in Turin in 2022. Here, we celebrated our first major success with more than half of the student body registering their interest in alternative proteins by signing up to our society. In January, we were over the moon after having provided a roadmap for a curriculum and showing that interest into alternative proteins exists, when we received the news that EIT Food would put protein diversification, as they chose to call it, on the menu for incoming students in 2023. With contributions from the universities of Hohenheim in Germany, Reading in the UK, Turin in Italy, and Aarhus in Denmark, protein diversification is already a student favorite, being with one of the 2 tracks available, being the second most popular of all of the MFS focus areas. In track 1, students begin their journey in Reading, studying modules under the umbrella of personalized nutrition and the consumer. Particularly, understanding and influencing consumer behavior will be a key skill in the future of alternative proteins. The next semester takes students to Aarhus with a more traditional food tech semester and an additional focus on sensory sciences. They conclude their in-person lectures in Hohenheim with a variety of modules around plant-based meat alternatives. The second track begins in Hohenheim with the same modules as in the first. Afterwards, students travel to Italy, to Turin, to study sustainable bioprocesses and green extraction technologies and byproduct valorization, to name a few. This again shows the benefits of repackaging existing offerings as they gain new meaning when looked at from a different context. Students in the second track conclude their studies in Aarhus, however, with a different curriculum as in the first track. Here, students will participate in Aarhus University's flagship course on cellular agriculture, future animal-based foods. To conclude, I want to highlight my 5 key takeaways. First of all, alternative proteins are so much more than just food biotech, as we depend on a wide range of skills to achieve our mission. Interdisciplinary curricula will equip students with the necessary circumspection to become the system-changing thought leaders we need. Secondly, leverage existing ties to admin and focus early on finding motivated faculty at your institution. This will not only help you speed up the process, but in addition, allow you to fine-tune the curriculum from the beginning. From experience, I can now say that working with academic institutions requires a lot of patience. Initiating relevant side projects will help you to keep your team involved and make sure that everyone involved is having fun. Without founding appetite, we likely wouldn't have gotten here, as our idea was put off as idealistic in the beginning. Generating the student interest and providing the numbers to prove it was an elemental step to change this narrative. Last but not least, stay involved. stay involved. In the end, it wasn't even so much us doing the work, but rather we set things in motion. Building curricula is really a university's job, and they will likely, hopefully, do it better than you. However, as we all know best, alternative proteins are a rapidly evolving field, and it is important to stay on top of the most recent developments. So, make sure you are present when the next revision comes. Which brings me to where we are right now. While the MFS protein diversification focus area will need to be further fine-tuned in the coming years, the commitment to such a curriculum by a major European institution is a milestone in all protein education. For this achievement, I would like to thank Paul, the whole Appetite team, and everyone at GFI that guided us along the way. Thank you.
All right, let's give it up for Adrian. Thank you so much for that inspiring case study. Next up, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Yoav Livni to the stage. Yoav is a professor of biotechnology and food engineering at the Technion in Israel Institute of Technology. Today, Yoav will be giving us a window into his experiences laying the groundwork for the Sustainable Protein Innovation Center, which was announced earlier this year. Thank you so much for being with us today, Yoav.
Thank you. How do we start the right presentation for me, please? Okay, thank you. So, hi everyone. I'd like to tell you about the Technion Sustainable Protein Research Center, which I've been leading together with my colleague Professor Avi Spiegelman and Mr. David Shemtov from the Technion Research and Development Foundation. And it's been organized and established in cooperation with the Good Food Institute, particularly the Israeli branch of the GFI. Okay, so Israel is, as you know, the food tech nation. So you might think we're second only to the US in terms of investment in startups. So you think, why do we need a research center, right? Everything is going so well for us. And so actually, we realized that many of the startup companies, when they come to materialize all their vision and their promises, they bump into a lot of knowledge gaps, and they need help to overcome those knowledge gaps. And for that, in order to maximize the impact of Israel in closing those knowledge gaps, solving the problems, and boosting the sustainable protein innovation and dissemination, the Technion has established the Sustainable Protein Research Center. We already have several startup companies that have been established in the last few years, like Aleph Farms from Professor Shulamit Levenberg's lab, Metafora from Professor Marcel Machlouf's lab, and Milliways from Excelta from Professor Joseph Iskovich from Faculty of Medicine. But when you look at the whole thing, if you want to really boost forward the field, there is this flywheel of, first of all, the rising need and the rising demand for alternative proteins, as we all know. Then there's need for investment, for private funding, philanthropic funding to boost research, and that enables to increase the R&D and to do the scale up and eventually get better products on the market, and that flywheel goes on. But to push it faster forward, because we don't have a lot of time and things must happen fast, so we need more funding to do all the research, to close all those knowledge gaps, and for that we've established the research center, and to coordinate all of the research activities, get all people on board, and also partners not just within the Technion but also outside, and to enhance the innovation and commercialization. Eventually we need more startups and more products on the market. And so eventually our focus is really to improve the end product quality, sensory, health-wise, and so on, and to lower the prices by scaling up. And for that we need to address fundamental bottlenecks, and we need to do that by research and development efforts. Over the last few years in the Technion, we've had several major milestones which helped bring us to this moment. And already in 2017, Technion was the co-founder of the EAT Food. You heard in the last talk about the EAT Food. I was personally involved in that effort all over the years from the start. In 2017, Aleph Farms was established. 2018, one of the major programs within the EAT Food was the EAT FAN, or EAT Accelerator program for new startups. And in the first year already, the winner in that program all over the 5 hubs all over Europe was Redefined Meat, which was accelerated in our department at the Technion, and the 3D printed plant-based meat alternative. In 2019, we had another important milestone was the Food IoT. It was a consortium trying to get the IoT, big data, into the food industry. In 2021, we had the Carasso family donating $4 million to establish the Carasso Food Innovation Center, which is basically a facility, a building that is now being constructed, and it will be ready in 2024. Meatafora was established in 2022. Also, it was a cultivated meat consortium that year. And in October 2022, I organized a conference which we called the Taste of the Future event, and Liz Specht was one of our keynote speakers there. And that event was helpful to nucleate the community, to get people from different faculties involved and to get this activity started around the Sustainable Protein Research Center. And indeed, in January 23, the Technion has announced, the Technion management has announced that the Sustainable Protein Research Center, apparently it is the first academic research center of alternative protein in the world, and it's a $20 million commitment by the Technion management. Our vision is by uniquely synergizing the Technion's expertise in science, engineering, medicine, food and biotechnology, the SPRC will expand the scientific and engineering foundations and pave the path for the crucial transition to a sustainable food system based on tasty, healthy, and price-competitive sustainable protein solutions. Our mission is, first of all, to foster strong, multidisciplinary, sustainable protein research and collaboration between Technion's life sciences, medicine, and engineering faculties, to innovate and develop various technologies for producing tasty, healthy, and price-competitive products with global impact, to attract various talented new faculty members across various disciplines, provide exceptional training opportunities both for students and for industrial personnel, to cultivate entrepreneurship and drive commercialization activities, and to support the industry by various research services. The Carasso Innovation Center I mentioned earlier, that's how it's going to look like when it's finished in about a year from now. So that's going to be our main building, our main facility, but activities will be campus-wide. We have over 30 different researchers from 10 different faculties who are active or wanting to be active in these activities. You see from different faculties and from different fields of activities. And some of the research activities are in all different aspects. For example, in cell and tissue culture, we have a project on upscalable cultivated meat platforms, on plant-based scaffolds for tissue culture by electrospinning. Also in fermentation, we have fermentation-based production of growth factors for tissue culture, enhancing fish protein expression in yeast by synthetic biology, fermentation process for recombinant potato protein, and so on. In plant-based, we have algae protein-based 3D printed fish, which is coming from my lab, fat mimetic systems based on plant-based ingredients, cheese substitutes, and so on. We also have some other projects like circular utilization of side streams to improve safety and functionality of protein-rich biomasses, and we're also looking into consumer behavior, consumer acceptance, and so we have a project on how environmental considerations affect buying decisions of consumers. Some of the highlights of the research activities in 2022, 2023, for example, as I mentioned, in January, the Technion announced the establishment of the initiative. We had between March and May, GFI Israel was very helpful for us to do a campus-wide screening and interviewing of various researchers to realize what are their ongoing studies, what are their planned activities, expertise, equipment, facilities, collaborations in the various research areas to map the scene and see also where we need new faculties, where we don't have people to fill those white spaces. And I mentioned the event of the nucleation, but in July we also had a community build-up event where we also invited several researchers from other universities in Israel and other research institutes which we thought could collaborate with us, which have different complementary expertise. So that's our real story, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think the combination of that timeline and that team roster that you were able to share with us really speaks to the power of what you are building. The next speaker that I would like to introduce is another one of our student leaders with the Alt Protein Project, Anchang Mumakom Maximus. Anchang is a Ph.D. candidate in food science and technology at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, at which he co-founded the first Alt Protein Project chapter on the African continent. He will be speaking on how he contributed to the nascent alt protein ecosystem in his region by being one of the first to open dialogues across various silos of expertise. And I am sorry to say that Anchang could not be present with us in person today, but we are so grateful to have his contributions virtually. Please join me in welcoming Anchang.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anchang Mumakom Maximus. I am a PhD student and the Director of Research of the University of Nigeria Alt Protein Project. And my presentation will be about the food system workshop which we organize at our campus. Before I dive deep, I would like to highlight that there is no commercial interest to be disclosed in this presentation. But first, let us have an overview of what the University of Nigeria ecosystem looks like. You can see that it has the required researchers, the departments, research groups, and research facilities with a very huge potential to conduct alternative protein research. We have seen from the previous slide that this community has the required researchers, research groups, and facilities. But this can only be fully optimized if they are aware that they have to use these research facilities to advance alternative protein research, education, and innovation, not just at UNN alone, but in the whole of Nigeria, since this is just a small sample of what happens to the whole of Nigeria. But unfortunately, the ideal situation is far different from the actual situation because there is limitation in this awareness. And because of this limitation, there is no smooth transition from alternative protein education to research, and then research to innovation. And then this has made the Nigerian ecosystem, the food system, to be weak. And this is one of the reasons why you can see Nigeria still rank 103 out of 121 countries in the Global Hunger Index, and still there are fewer than 5 alternative protein companies in Nigeria. What was now the way forward to creating this awareness and allowing this community to actively engage in alternative protein research, education, and innovation? In fact, the food systems workshop was the only answer. We have seen from the previous slide that we needed to organize this workshop, but our major issue was where to get funds for it. So I wrote a grant proposal and submitted to the German Academic Exchange Service for a 2-day workshop. Just to let you know, the GAAG is the world's largest funders for the academic exchange of researchers and students. So I was already a member of this organization since my MSc program was already funded by them. So in the application proposal, I submitted an honoraria, transportation, feeding, and accommodation for the speakers. I equally submitted the detailed program of activities and a potential list of participants. The workshop participants were GAT alumni from 5 different countries, including Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, Benin, and Ethiopia. The University of Nigeria Outputting Project members, some students and lecturers of UNN, Beggy Victory, and Provec International. Beggy Victory is actually the first food tech company in Nigeria involved in plant-based meat production, while Provec International advocates for the global reduction in animal-based meals by 50% in 2040. What were the workshop objectives, and which presenter helped us to achieve which objective? The first objective was to introduce participants to the food systems, and Professor Okafor introduced the participants on the components of the food system, taking Nigeria as a case study, and this was based on his level of experience in the Nigerian food systems. After Professor Okafor's presentation, participants identified potential areas for collaboration to enhance the Nigerian food system. The second objective of the workshop was to help participants to gain insights on the inefficiencies of the global food systems. And I already had a better understanding of these inefficiencies, and so I had to lead by presenting the inefficiencies of the current food systems, and I took Nigeria as a case study. After my presentation, participants worked in focus groups and brought out a working document highlighting why the global hunger index of Nigeria has remained very high. And some of the reasons they gave was due to the growth in population, rapid increase in urbanization, low levels of nutrition education and awareness. After objective 2 was achieved, we went straight to the third objective, which was to help participants to gain insights into the role of alternative proteins and how this technology can be used to transform the food system and also secure a better protein supply for the Nigerian population. And so I wanted someone who had a general overview of the technology of alternative proteins, and David Umale was the ideal candidate for it. So he gave his presentation on how the future of protein supply in Nigeria can be enhanced through alternative proteins. Since Provec Nigeria was one of the participants, so I needed someone to represent Provec Nigeria, and the communication manager of Provec, Mary Beth, actually gave her presentation on how Provec Nigeria is advancing the future of sustainable food systems in Nigeria through plant-based proteins. The third presenter who helped us to achieve objective 3 was the CEO of Beggy Victory, Mr. Hakim Jimo. So he has been in this space for more than 10 years, and he was the ideal person to bring in the industrial experience, how he's using the alternative protein technologies to advance the field of all proteins in Nigeria. After the 3 presentations, the following outcomes were obtained for objective 3. From a small survey conducted during the workshop, most of the participants showed interest in diving deep into the technology of plant-based proteins. And Beggy Victory has set up a kiosk on campus and is going to be donating free food samples in case the University of Nigeria Outputting Project wants to do a food testing event. In addition to these outcomes, participants also had the opportunity to test plant-based meats for the first time. Participants also got to know about the University of Nigeria Ahlgrim project and the Good Food Institute as the hub of science for alternative protein education, research, and innovation. After these milestones from objective 1, 2, and 3, what is now the new hope for the ecosystem? In fact, I know 3 lecturers that are already giving research topics to their students to conduct research on plant-based proteins. With the advent of Beggy Victory on campus, obviously the ecosystem is likely going to grow. And researchers, they already know about the GFI grants, and they are likely going to submit applications to conduct alternative protein research. And again, I know 2 DAG alumni that are collaborating to conduct alternative protein research. Thanks for listening.
Amy warned me it was a long way to the stage. I am so grateful to have learned of An Chang's work along with the University of Alt Protein Project of University of Nigeria. And I do want to remind everybody that this is one of many examples that the alt protein ecosystem is broader and much more beautiful than even what we have in the conference. Because An Chang and David were not able to join us in person, please reach out to them on Swapcard and all of the other virtual attendees as well, so that we can ensure that everybody's voices can be included in the conversation. And with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker. Lisa Neidhardt is a PhD candidate in clinical biochemistry at the University of Cambridge. Lisa will be sharing how she and her group approached the very ambitious goal of creating a center for excellence in an ecosystem with ample research acumen, but an underdeveloped ecosystem awareness and coordination. You can use that one too. Please join me in welcoming Lisa.
Thank you, Nathan, for this very kind introduction. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share our story here with you. Because what is really becoming apparent here to me on this conference is that the alternative protein field really faces a variety of challenges, and that no single person or group can address them all. And for the next couple of minutes, I'd like to focus on one particular bottleneck that can be addressed, especially also coming from a student background, which is the scarcity of public academic research in the alternative protein space. Because studying alternative protein technologies at academic institutions really represents a huge opportunity for not only information sharing and open access research, but also for talent development. And altogether, this would really benefit the progression of the field as a whole. I am Lisa, and I'm part of the team that is running the student initiative at Cambridge University in the UK. And I'm very excited to share our approach to attack exactly this bottleneck with you now, by bringing alternative protein research to Cambridge University. So when I joined the team about 2 years ago, we set ourselves an admittedly pretty ambitious goal, which is to found and build an alternative protein academic research center at our university. So, but how do we go about addressing this ambitious goal? Well, let's have a look at this report from our friends at Cellular Agriculture UK, because this report provides evidence about our university's potential and relevant activities. So if we zoom here into this list of universities in the UK, we can see that Cambridge is doing very well, which means dark blue, in terms of research strengths in bioscience, chemical engineering, as well as student and academic interest, spin-out ecosystem, and proximity to already existing alternative protein companies. But you can also see that there in the middle is a gap. And this means that at Cambridge, we are actually lacking expertise in food science on campus, as well as already existing alternative protein research in general. And of course, this is very much a snapshot of an ever-changing landscape in a growing environment, but it tells us where we stand and where we need to go. Because in our rationale, we thought, well, we have this world-leading research happening at Cambridge, and we just need to apply it to bottlenecks in the alternative protein space. And this is why we set out and scoped the potential for alternative protein research at our university and mapped our university ecosystem. As a framework, we used the GFI Solutions Database, which is basically a list of problems or white spaces that can be addressed by academic research. And with this tool, we identified players in our ecosystem whose skill set can be applied to address exactly these technical bottlenecks. And as a result, we identified approximately 100 principal investigators, out of which we earmarked 32 as particularly highly relevant. And the next step, we reached out to them, shared with them why we are interested in their work, and engaged them in initial conversations and told them how their skills can be applied to bottlenecks in the alternative protein space. So, whilst we were reaching out to these candidates, we realized that even though we now build relationships to the involved stakeholders, which are interested academics, as well as funding bodies who could potentially sponsor such projects. And of course, not to mention also the very active student body we have in Cambridge that's very keen and wanting to engage in opportunities like internships. We realized that really these are pieces of a puzzle that needed to be brought together. And in order to, the binding element between these pieces, we envisioned to host an alternative protein workshop to really literally bring these pieces physically together in one room. So this workshop was designed to achieve two goals. First, relationship building between these stakeholders, and this was achieved by designing this workshop in an unconference style. And this is basically a format that is participant-oriented, where attendees can engage interactively into discussions and brainstorming sessions. And second, we were keen to start building momentum and actually develop already initial alternative protein proposals. And this was achieved by hosting interactive breakout rooms during these days, led by field experts. Because we were realizing that our interested academics were not yet experts in the field, so we were keen to match their interest with established researchers from the field. And together they were engaging in facilitated discussions revolving around questions like, what are the bottlenecks that need to be addressed right now? How can your research skills be applied to do that, and which collaborations do you envisage to do so? So as a result, we are very proud that we hosted earlier this year the very first alternative protein workshop in Cambridge, out of which you can see a photo here. And just to give you a couple of numbers, we had 35 attendees in total, 16 out of which were senior Cambridge-based academics, interdisciplinary. So we had 7 UK-based field experts, as well as a representative of funding bodies and businesses. And of course, all of this would have not been possible without the support of a number of collaborators, also the GFI, and our really engaged and excited student body. So as I was mentioning already, the heart of this workshop were really these interactive brainstorming sessions. And they were happening in 2 flavors. The first session was hosted focus-specific. So we were splitting the attendees according to their expertise and background in plant-based meat, fermentation, cultivated meat, and the social dimensions of alternative proteins. And this really allowed a platform for participants to dig deep into the details. In the second part of the day, we were a little bit more experimental and were mixing disciplines in the breakout rooms. And this is really to emphasize the collaborative and interdisciplinary spirit of the alternative protein space. So this workshop really marked the inception of the Cambridge Alternative Protein Network, which is a platform and a binding element of these involved stakeholders that continues to serve as a binding element with the overarching goal to really establish Cambridge as an interdisciplinary hub for alternative protein research in the UK in collaboration with other universities as well. So last but not least, I'd just like to share with you a few lessons learned along the way. And the first point really addresses what Adrian was already mentioning, that university ecosystems are incredibly complex and actually feel like a jungle that's very difficult to navigate. So engaging an interdisciplinary team of students early on to map the landscape and also reach out to already established collaborators is absolutely essential and helpful. Also, because we are students, our approach is inherently more of a bottom-up approach, which comes with the caveat that we have limited credibility. And this is why finding early on more senior alternative protein champions that help you along the way is really crucial. And last but not least, because we in Cambridge were lacking existing knowledge in food science on campus, for us it was really important to build relationships with field experts early on already. So all in all, this is just one example on how alternative protein research can come to the university. And as my call for action, I would really love to encourage and inspire you to think big and creatively on how you can leverage the strengths of your local ecosystem to join the protein transition. If you're a student and being engaged in a student initiative, and also I'd really like to take the opportunity here as a shout out for everyone who can serve as an alternative protein champion, because this can really leverage the enthusiasm of a student group at a university. Overall, our work is still very much work in progress, and we continue keeping and updating our strategy. And we are also still on the lookout for our alternative protein champion in Cambridge. So if you have any ideas, thoughts, questions, or just want to connect, please reach out to us, to me. Thank you very much for your attention.
That was so incredible, Lisa. Thank you for the incredible work that you have made happen in the Cambridge ecosystem, and thank you for sharing your wealth of insights with us today. All right, last but not least, I'm very excited to be joined today by Professor A.J. Malsh from Purdue. AJ is a distinguished professor of mechanical engineering and agricultural and biological engineering at Purdue University. AJ will be sharing today how he's mobilized a team of his colleagues at Purdue and neighboring institutions to form a vision for a consortium of cellular agriculture research and training. AJ, please welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is really a pleasure to be here, and thanks to GFI, especially Amy and colleagues, to make this possible. So what I would like to share is a story or a journey that is still continuing. It is always important that when you build an initiative, you need a brand. And our brand is iCafe, Initiative for Convergent Biomanufacturing for Agriculture and Food for Equity. That word highlights it is a convergence of multiple talents, as many colleagues said. It is biomanufacturing, this is the new bioeconomy, and at the same time it is equitable for climate, farmers, and for people. So it is very important that you come up with the right title that is inclusive to all. This is a story of many of my colleagues, those who have been my friends, colleagues, collaborators, in various ways. We enjoy great beer as well. So with that, I'm going to share this story that what we had done. We have started looking at that why we are working on this and not what we are working on this. These are the well-identified trends and drivers that we felt from population to trade, energy decarbonization, and various others. Those are really calling as world by 2050 would reach with 9.2 billion people expected and all these complexities, where we are really heading right now. So it is not where we are. It is like in the hockey stick. There is a saying that don't watch where the puck is, watch where it is going. So this is where we are heading to. So with that interest, one of the important things that we also realize that with the younger population and their exposure to the global taste of different food, we need to create some unique taste as well. So those are some of the drivers that told us. Another thing that we realize, that current food supply chain is connected between the rural and urban area. When I talk to individual, that food and agriculture, first thing that occurred to my mind is rural area. It is a trigger. I think about the rural side, I think about the farmer, I think about all the soil that I'm going to walk it in, and that where the animals are. But at the same time, 70% America today live in the urban areas. So there is a discrepancy and the divide where we grow, where we process, and where we eat. And with that there is a necessity for harmonization. Next generation, what is coming is not how we make it, but how do we harmonize it. Because during pandemic, what has happened that many people in the urban areas bought housing in the rural areas, and they are moving now back into the rural areas. So that harmonization for food system is going to be important. So through that journey, what we came to the conclusion is food security is a national security. Now one would wonder that me coming from Purdue, in the middle of Indiana, surrounded by soybean, corn, pea protein, and all the fields, why I believe that it should be a national security. I want you to take a pause and ask yourself a question. What was one of the outcomes of the war in Ukraine? With the war in Ukraine, in America, we missed baby formula, we missed fertilizers, and we missed wheat. Imagine where the Ukraine is and where we are. We miss everything between a child would need and a grown-up would need, and what we'll need to grow the next crop. Now that told us that from harvestable land to supply chain to climate to grain, per capita harvestable land, even in America, today is a challenge, and we realize that food security is a national security. Climate, farmers, community, they're all the part of this. But think about it for a second. People a lot talk about semiconductor chips. Semiconductor chips, the data go through the semiconductor chip, but the food goes through my gut. And that is more important to me than silicon. And I realized that I need to work on this very importantly. Now to something like this, it addresses also 5 important pillars. Climate is number 1. Food equity, number 2. I must highlight some of the facts. There are a lot of students, very aspiring leaders here. In America, 25 to 30% students in any university and 2-year colleges are food insecure. So think about this. Me as a professor, being in my classroom, on an average, 20% of my own fellow students don't have access to meal for more than one time in per day. How can I be fair to somebody that has equal abilities, but one is good fed and one is ill fed? Their biological, neurological responses would be different, and the genesis of unfairness is in the access to the food. And so it is very important that food security and equity need to be addressed. Jobs are equally important. At the same time, manufacturing. One thing that has happened in America in the last 40 years is that we shipped out most of the job overseas. And I realized between burgers, books, and beer, if we don't make anything, then we have a problem as a nation. And so with that, manufacturing, making the things. How many times we learn about the new recipes when we are in the kitchen and we make something and say, aha, I can make the next recipe now. So making and manufacturing and biomanufacturing is very important. Because when I say people biotech and biomanufacturing, they think expensive pharmaceuticals. They don't think food. I lived in the state where there were agriculture, manufacturing, chicken houses, slaughtering every second, every day. I asked people that I work in biomanufacturing. They say, what part? Biotech? I said, yes. Their natural thinking that my earning is better. I have a better living style. If I tell somebody that I work in the chicken manufacturing plant, they think I'm an illegal immigrant. I have a low wages. I'm making a bare minimum. Both are biotechnologies, right? Perceptions, realities. So food margins are very less. Pharmaceutical margins are very high. This is where another reason for inequity is. So after realizing this, we set on a path to ask a question ourselves at Purdue. Where are we? What is our role in these ecosystems? And we realized that our role in this ecosystem is that we are in Midwest. We are in the farmland of America, which is also called the breadbasket of America. We are also in the meat capital, used to be of America, between Chicago and Indianapolis. Chicago used to be a meat packaging capital. And Indianapolis was surrounded by meat equipment manufacturing companies. At the same time, we have one of the top colleges of agriculture. At the same time, one of the top colleges of engineering. So we realized that we have abundant talent to address this requirement, what is coming. So with that, we set on the long journey, very important journey. In this journey, if you realize on the left-hand side, spring of 2020, right before pandemic, the process began by harmonizing multiple colleges from health sciences, agriculture, engineering, liberal arts, and even the College of Business. That next stop took us to look outward and reach out to colleagues from University of Nebraska at Lincoln, middle of the beef land of America. Texas A&M, Tufts University, biotech, where the biotech pharmaceutical companies are. At the same time, University of California at Merced. California and America's farmland is in the heart of Merced Valley, and that is something important, one of the largest minority serving institution in California. At the same time, University of Connecticut, Navajo Tech. What is Navajo Tech? The only accredited engineering program that is very fledgling and is in the most food insecure part of America. So with that, we landed on what is called road mapping. We didn't want to take something what people believe, what people think, what people tell. We wanted to go through the systematic journey of road mapping, including inclusion of Good Food Institute and other companies. This road mapping process told us we have followed University of Cambridge Institute for Manufacturing's algorithm to conduct a national road mapping effort funded by Department of Commerce. That told us that it is not creating an ecosystem of protein versus alternative protein. That versus would not work. We have to look at the crossroads, be inclusive of that crossroads, and that crossroads of America is where we started looking. We started building multiple talents, skills. And with those talents come different people at Purdue, 27 faculty at Purdue and 5 different colleges, and at the same time, equal number outside Purdue and equal talent. And what we aspire now? We aspire to build across America national biomanufacturing infrastructure network. Coast to coast, it is very inclusive. Anybody in the audience is interested, we want to partner with you. We will envision $200 million effort plus in nanoBiomanufacturing infrastructure network that we want to realize with our. But when all this ambition, we can't forget the reality that human has with food. As I said, the food goes to the guts. It is about relationships, memories, nostalgic, nutrition, and with that, we want to have the first thing, human experience and not the technology. So with that, I would like to thank you all, and I truly believe that every nutrition, every food matters when at least one human goes hungry. So with that, thank you again, and I will look forward to discuss this with you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, AJ. That was a fantastic presentation. At this point, we'd love to invite all of our speakers back onto the stage for a Q&A panel. This is a great opportunity for any of you who might have questions for our 6 speakers to raise those questions. We'll have my colleague Asia running around with a mic in case you guys have questions for any of our speakers. All right. Any questions from the audience to get us started? If not, Nathan?
Do I need this? I think this is on. Someone might be missing a mic. Okay, I appreciate the sharing. Well, one thing that I think came up, whether it was on a slide or implied, was just the idea of a timeline, about how all of these road mapping projects take a very long time. And I know Adrian had mentioned those small wins, those side projects to keep activated. So I would love to get some of your perspectives on when you are initiating this project. I would see this as useful for many in our audience. Are you aware of the timeline, or do you find that you are developing that as you grow? Do you know that it's going to take 3, 5 years, or is that something that is part of the discovery and road mapping process itself?
AJ, feel free to start us off, or Yoav.
Okay, I'll try. I guess, of course, to make big changes, it takes quite a lot of time, and it's a process. So I guess we weren't expecting an overnight success. We just realized that there is a great need, there's a great opportunity, and we need to join forces. And then we started thinking together and drawing the plan and looking into the future and try to first draw the vision and then draw the team around the vision, come up with a work plan, get the institute behind us, and move forward. So initially, we're thinking about a 5-year plan, but we wanted to be also organizationally sustainable. So we wanted, initially, we get maybe funding, philanthropic funding, but we want to form a organization which will be self-sustaining and propelling. And so as long as the need exists, we will have the sources and the people and whatever it takes to move forward. So we're looking long way into the future to build something that will last and propel it and move on.
If I may add to that, I would like to highlight some of the realities of any academic institution. Faculties are driven by their own areas of interest, and at the same time, what is the funding landscape out there? That is a reality. How do you anchor people at the start and even for a year or two when there is no funding whatsoever? There is a zero funding in the area, and at the same time you're truly in this because you believe that. You really find handful people, and those handful people are your core team members. They are your core team members. So when we started building this initiative, we really, it was a process of building trust on the mission. We wanted to make sure we know each other as a colleague just beyond academic and paper and proposals. It was a process of building that relationship because that is deeply rooted in. And then the third part was that because we believe on the mission, we kept meeting periodically, acting on it periodically. And the last thing that did help that I must highlight, that probably it was because of my gray beard, people believe that I'm old enough, that what I say is really true. And so university leadership, all the way from president of Purdue to the head of Department of Agriculture and others provided access to conduct a dialogue, to share with them and stand behind. So again, it was a multi-pronged approach, but building a trust, having a common goal, but at the same time, keep walking. There would be days when you're happy. There would be days where you can be happy potentially. But it is a process. And I do not think you can substitute that part of building the trust and the core team. I think it's a natural process. And I like the process because then it has a longevity. Thank you.
Thanks so much, AJ. Again, an invitation for questions from the audience, if any exists. We've got one over here. Thanks, Asia, for running the mic over.
Hi, thank you so much. All your stories were so inspiring. Honestly, I'm like really baffled. I took so many notes. I think my question is very general. I think applies to everyone. It's like, how did you deal with the pushbacks? I think IJ was kind of getting at that, but as a student, as a community organizer, or like in the case of the first presenter, like with like government pushback. So like, I guess amongst your own perspective, how did you deal with that in your particular construction of your ecosystem?
Great question. Wei Biao, do you want to start us off?
I would happily answer that.
Okay, oh, sorry.
No, you go.
You want to go ahead?
Okay, so we had a couple of pushbacks, and what really helped us through, and I mentioned it in my presentation, was just to have a bunch of other projects running on the side, because it is not 100% that whatever you're trying to do will get done, but just the initiative that you have and the momentum that you're building is so valuable that it would be a shame to let it go to waste. Having multiple things allows you to also take on more people, create a bigger momentum, and just ensure that if one thing doesn't come through, you're still able to continue with something else.
Thanks, Adrian.
Sorry.
Okay, I just want to add something like from a different perspective, I guess. I realize, particularly at this conference, there are so many people who come from a non-food science background. I'm from a food science background, therefore the approach and the momentum, the dynamics actually is quite different in my department. Okay, to the typical food science students, when you're looking at alternative protein, let it be plant-based or cultured meat, it's merely a change of a raw material. But your ultimate goal is to produce your palatable, lovely food people will enjoy that never change. So to food science students, it's actually coming very naturally. However, for example, you come with a culture meet, you need a different set of skills. And that need time to make the food science student realize. And collaboration is the way to go. I mean, I don't know how many undergraduate students in this audience, if you only have 4 years, you cannot be on top of everything. That's very clear. So it's a teamwork. And now, in my university at least, actually we have a multidisciplinary approach. Okay? Students are coming from other disciplines. For example, life science. Singapore used to be focusing very heavily on biomedical research for 10 to 15 years. And now the shift is towards outside the biomedical, but it's related. Okay, so you can have the same the skill set, but applying a different field, but working with a food scientist. That's what I want to call, make appeal to people coming from to this conference without a food science background. Please work with a food scientist. And many issues are actually very natural to food scientists. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Okay, that's my comments. Okay.
So I would like to actually add to this dialogue, because most of my colleagues come from one of some dense urban areas. Probably I'm one of the only one who come from the rural America, in the middle of cornfields, soybean fields, and farmers are very important there. Hog farming, you have butchers and other. And the words trigger in people's mind, word triggers. And I will be transparent to share my experiences of meeting farmers. When you use a word to a farmer that I'm making alternative protein, the response is very natural. And I will give you an example of that. If I may ask my colleague, can you tell me one of the brands, any brand that you like? What is one brand of a product they use you like?
I have no commercial interest to any company, so I need to be very careful. I can name a dozen or 2 dozens rather than just one. There are so many, top 500 companies, most of them are in Singapore. Top 500 food company, most of them in Singapore.
So I'll take a hypothetical example here in the given. So if you say you like iPhone, and I would give somebody that I will give you alternate iPhone, how many would take alternate iPhone? How many take alternate Nike? The point that I'm trying to make is that when you use the word alternate, it triggers in the person who make that mind that my income has an alternate that somebody's going to replace it with. That is a trigger, biological, fundamental trigger in psychology. And you had to learn that how to message it to people that are going to feel differently about it. Is it true? Not. They have an opportunity. But how do I connect to them is what I'm trying to tell you. So you mentioned about the pushback. What I found out one of the most powerful tools is to listen to them very calm and truly, long time listening to them. Let it sink in you, what does that mean? Think that you are in their shoe, how you will process that. And really message it in the words that they can truly understand and respect you. And that's what I found. It took time to convict the farmers. It is a process, but it is happening now.
I'd just like to add, maybe from a student perspective, that don't let perfectionism get into the way of your progress here. And even though we were speaking about pushback, or maybe you could phrase it as failure, I try to reset my mind to see it as continuously updating a strategy, getting to know the ecosystem, and then adapting to that. And especially coming here, I find inspiration in that, and I take this momentum to go to my local ecosystem and continue our mission that we brought us together here.
Thank you all.
Please.
Okay. And I think what I keep on hearing from everybody is, especially with whether we call it pushback, but the different avenues that we do have to approach, given the interdisciplinarity of the initiatives you are trying to build, is that it requires a very diverse team with diverse skill sets. And so what I would like to explore with what unfortunately will probably have to be our final question is, when you are looking to build these initiatives that you have discussed and your future initiatives, what a specific expertise is that you find sometimes most challenging to identify in a teammate given the ecosystems that you are in. And I know Anchang is able to join us virtually, so if you would be able to share your perspective on this, I would very much appreciate that.
Well, I must thank GFI. Okay.
Anchang's going to weigh in virtually.
Yes, I know we might be on a slight delay, so let's give him a chance if he's able to hear us. Anchang, are you able to hear us?
Oh. Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome, we can hear you too.
Okay, it's a pleasure meeting and speaking to you guys and to the whole of the participants. So the question is, please, can you please repeat the question?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. As you built out your team, you spoke about your partnership with David as one example. Thinking about the different expertise that you had as a food scientist, what other expertise were you looking for as you were building out your team?
Oh, okay, thank you very much. So, this issue of organic protein is not just about the expertise of food science. We all need everybody to be actively involved, both who are in the social sciences, because when we were trying to organize our conference, first of all, we said we are going to organize an alternative protein conference, and most of the students around, those who are not in FSC, they were asking like, what exactly is alternative protein? So we decided to reshape it, and then we said we are organizing a conference where students and participants will get to see meat produced from plants. So it's like the name alternative is actually an issue, and then we really need people who are in social sciences, those who are really in the social science space, can actually work on the psychology of those who are in the receiving end to actually make it known, so that it should not like just be about those who are involved in the in food tech, those who are actively involved in the food system. So we need every other aspect, any other aspect of alternative proteins, not just those who are in food science and science related to alternative proteins.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Anchang. Really appreciate your reflections. I think that just about wraps up the time we have for Q&A today. Thank you so much to everybody who's joined us in the audience and virtually for this series of case studies and reflections. Thank you so much to our speakers for helping give us a window into the phenomenal things that you've built in your respective academic ecosystems. I know that we are going to ride this wave into the future and that all of you are really critical pieces of making sure alternative proteins can one day be no longer alternative. Nathan, did you want to wrap up with any final thoughts?
All I wanted to say is that for those of you in the audience who now have different ideas of what you might be able to bring back to your universities, remember that as we saw with all of our speakers, that will look different for all of your universities, and that is essentially the point. Because building that world where alternative proteins are a key part of the food system will require so many different kinds of expertise that you do not need to fit a model, you need to build within your model. And I just appreciate all of our speakers for showing us one of theirs. So please join me in thanking them, and thank you for your time.